freshman class to have a speaker who is going to discuss with you the real life situation about the book that you had just read. Mr. Aaron Krantz was able to bring this person in, and I'm going to ask Mr. Aaron Krantz to please introduce him and the topic. Thank you.
So indeed it is a great honor to have a counselor and officer, Franklyn Fawundu, from the permanent mission to the United Nations on behalf of Sierra Leone. For all intents and purposes, what that means is he represents his country, okay, to the United Nations. He is the foremost expert on what we have read in Ishmael Bay's A Long Way Gone. The format for today's discussion is the Honorable Franklyn Fawundu will grace us with a 20-minute presentation, followed by approximately 15 minutes of orderly question and answer period. There are microphones at either end. We will alternate. And without further ado, Mr.
Thank you, students, and let me first of all thank you for the interest you have in reading about my country, and I appreciate the fact that Sierra Leone is so far away from America, but you have grown interest in reading Ishmael's book, which basically gave you an account of some of the issues that happened during our 11 years of war. And I was told by Mr. Myers that you have comprehensively read that book and you know it from front to back, which is the basis for our discussion today. But basically I will look at the role the government has played over the years in trying to improve situations regarding child soldiers and the general youth populace in the country. But I believe I should start with the background and give you some kind of knowledge about the country. Our population is about 6.1 million people. I don't know, that would be the population of one state in America or even lesser. But we have an area of 740 square kilometers. We were colonized by the British up to 1961 when we had independence as a country. So basically we also speak English, but with different accents, not with the American accent. Our religions are Christianity and Islam. And one beauty about my country is that the Muslims can marry the Christians. As I stand here, my mother is a Muslim. My father, late father, was a Catholic. So these are all not barriers in terms of marriage and people living together. So that tells you it's a country of people that are tolerant, that could embrace each other. We don't have much of religious problems or chaos or wars. Now to the topic itself. I think I need to give you some insight into the root causes of the account Ishmael gave, which we think was what led to the killings, chopping of hands and limbs that he gave account of in that book. We have so many minerals as a country. We have diamonds, we have bauxite, we have rutile. The resources that were generated from these minerals were never evenly distributed as a country. So what happened? A lot of people felt malcontent, discontent, unhappy, that why should we have all these resources and we are still in poverty? So that was one of the reasons that led to the war. And also the government system favored certain people, which we normally call nepotism. A system where certain people were favored and others were not favored, and it made people unhappy in society. The opportunities for education was low. In Sierra Leone at that time, 75% of the entire population were illiterate. Only 15% had access to education. Only 15% before the war could read and write. So you can see the margin. 75% cannot read and write. 15% were able to read and write. So with all of those things, it brewed. It kind of started escalating. The problems were piling up. And the youth population were highly unemployed. People graduated from universities, technical vocational schools. They were perambulating the streets of Freetown without a job. So all of these grievances, all of these discontents kept piling up. And the moment the rebel leader, Fode Sebana Sanko, who came with the revolution, the moment he fired the first shot, all of these disgruntled groups, all of these unhappy people, because they were marginalized, they didn't benefit from the government resources, they were uneducated, they were unemployed, they joined the fight. So the fight started and the war escalated. And this is where Ishmael's accounts come in. The revolution decided to use children as child soldiers, because what happens during normally our formative years, more within the teenage bracket, it's easier to brainwash a teenager. It's easier to manipulate a teenager as compared to an adult. An adult will always know his left from his right. I don't mean to demean you teenagers, but these are critical ages. We normally call it in education the period of storm and stress. Teenage and adolescent group. Very critical moments. These are moments you either take decisions that will have forever impact on you, if they are bad, or good ones that you benefit from for the rest of your life. So, one of the areas the rebels decided to tap were children. They gave them drugs, they gave them all sorts of opiums, gave them guns. Some of them didn't even know how to shoot those guns. It was only later they started firing their first shots. So imagine a child having a gun. He or she has nothing to think of. If you give me a gun to shoot, I think of my family first. I have kids. Think of them. Am I going to die? Am I going to leave my kids behind? For someone who has nothing in front, nothing at the back, he or she will go headlong. Children were effectively used to escalate the war. And these same rebels decided to use some part of government paramilitary. Within the government itself, a lot of the military officers were not happy with the governance system. So some of the military officers pitched tents with the rebels. And also, the rebel forces had their own group. Basically, what I'm trying to bring out is the war itself had so many players. You had the children used as armed soldiers, government paramilitary, rebel forces. These were all issues that led to human rights abuses. And the only way the United Nations system thought they could intervene was to come up with the protocol and the Convention on the Right of the Child, which is an instrument even today we use at the United Nations because we don't want a reoccurrence of children being used in any form of conflict anymore. And the United Nations strictly monitor and observe member states who violate these protocols, because we see you as innocent people who have no bearing to do with internal conflict, and therefore you should not be the sufferers in any situation of war. Well, we had a system to see how we can de-escalate the war, and the government, with the support of its donors, came up with a system called DDR, the disarmament, demobilization, and the reintegration process. I mean, this was a means of transition of these children from combatant life into normal life, or into civilian life, or into society, because a lot of them were kind of being rejected by their people after causing all of this mayhem, these troubles. But government needed to reintegrate them into society, and the DDR was meant for that. So the first phase of it was they disarmed the child soldiers, they tried to bring them in one place, immobilize them, and try to reintegrate them into society. There were even moments when government decided to give money in return for arms. They give monies to these child soldiers and they return their arms. And at the end of the day, they were taken into various trades. Some of them learned, they became mechanics, some of them became professionals in Garadine, some of them, those who wanted to pursue higher education, were given the opportunity. So, after the collection and documentation, control and disposal of arms, the formal and controlled discharge of active combatants, and the provision of support package. By reintegrating these kids into society, government needed to put so many things into place. Housing, schooling. These were all very expensive projects that government needed to put in place. But thank God it went on well, and later on these kids were able to reintegrate into society. There are still some that are doing very well within our country. So, let us go to the lessons learned. one of the lessons learned from all of this was that ex-combatant needs were met to avoid abuse by military authorities, because the military still thought they had control over these combatants. And one of the areas government also emphasized was the reunification, because most of these kids had separated from their parents. We needed to bring them together with their parents, and the reunions were very good. Also, the mental problem most of these kids had were treated. We tried to recover them from those negative experiences. A lot of them suffered from what you may call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And the government needed to work on all of those things to see how they can become real citizens that are decent within society. And that led to reducing their aggressive behavior. And unfortunately for our country, we only had one psychiatrist who was dealing with thousands of people. But we thank God the United Nations and other organizations were able to intervene to get the help of psychiatrists from other countries. Finally, we decided to also emphasize the provision of education and professional training, like I mentioned earlier, for these kids, so that they could be able to fend for themselves. You know, there is always the saying that it is better to teach somebody how to bake bread rather than give him bread. So even though government was sponsoring these kids, at a certain point they needed to be independent and to be able to work for themselves and earn for themselves. So these training programs were very necessary for them. So, after learning all of those bitter lessons, government decided to emphasize in areas that could generally benefit youths, not only child soldiers now. Government realized that because of the high unemployment of youths, they were very vulnerable or susceptible to any manipulation. So you try to get the youths engaged, put them into some work that they should do for themselves, rather than leave them freely move around the streets of Freetown. And our population has about 65% that are youths, that are young men, young ladies between 18 to around about 30 something. So you needed to empower that particular generation of people. So what government did was generate jobs for them in the mining companies, in the agricultural sector. Then also government decided to come up with youth-sensitive policies that are legal and regulatory within the environment. Then we decided to move them into development policies. Government decided to do a lot of decentralization. Rather than centralizing governance, they decided to decentralize into what you call in America into boroughs, into states. We call it provinces back home. So government empowered those provinces to have their own programs and policies that were development oriented. Some of these developments were either micro or macro. And also, like I said, they moved into the agricultural sector. Some moved into education. Some moved into skills training activities. Then one key area that government had lacking before was also strengthened, which is gender mainstreaming. Our country used to be a male chauvinistic country where men took priority over women. But after these experiences, And after the Commission of Inquiry on the War, government decided to emphasize gender mainstreaming, that a boy and a girl are equal. A boy, anything that a boy does could be done by a girl. Initially, we didn't know that. We are all leaning towards men. Health promotion issues came, HIV, AIDS, drugs use. Government decided to sensitize youth on some of these issues to try to ameliorate the problem. But amidst all of that, there are still challenges facing the youth today. Government has done its best. Government has tried, but it has not been able to solve all of the youth problems. There are few challenges. The unemployment and underemployment is still high. Underemployment simply means you are employed, but you don't get the pay. The pay is not commensurate to the work you do. And most times, government is the biggest employer of the country, and the government hasn't got all the resources to pay you according to your skills or your professionalism. So sometimes you're underemployed. There is still lack of quality education in certain areas in Sierra Leone. Not everybody has access to quality education, which is really not too good. But government is still trying to intervene. There is still low investment in technical vocational education. There are still drug use in certain areas. And the government has formed the anti-drug policy, and they're trying to reduce some of this drug use. There is still failure to address all of the gender issues that come up. There are still certain areas in the country that believe that women should be at the back. But these are the areas that are more mostly concentrated. The government is also faced with a challenge, and but they're trying their best. After all of that, 2 years ago we were hit by Ebola, a very bad virus that killed thousands of people. And the Ebola outbreak crumbled down our economy, and it had a lot of impact on the country. It interrupted education, schools were closed, a lot of teenagers got pregnant because they were not going to school. They engaged into other activities. The health system collapsed because the health system was not sophisticated enough to meet the Ebola outbreak. And also, there was a decrease in health services. We were not prepared for it. We lacked the preparedness. As a country, we have never faced that kind of disease. And more people die from preventable illnesses than even Ebola. We have malaria back home. I don't know if some of you know of malaria. It's a very dangerous disease from mosquitoes. A lot of people die from that. And the investment within the country, all of those who are investing to the country, the mining companies, they all came to a halt. Then there was no good water and sanitation system, and youth could not participate in development. I would have spoken here for hours, but I think I have some time limitation. There comes the end of my presentation, and I think I'll entertain questions from you. just a minute. When they point at you, let me just have your name and your question, so that when I'm answering your questions, I could tag your name to your question. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Counsellor. My name is Robert Adler, and I just wanted to ask you, in 1995, the government of Sierra Leone hired the Executive Outcomes, a mercenary group from South Africa, to help drive the RUF out of Freetown. Why wouldn't the government of Sierra Leone call for UN aid at that time, sending in soldiers to help drive back the RUF?
Okay, what I'll do, I'll take 5 and respond, then I take the other 5, all right? Noted, I will respond to you, Robert.
I'm Salman Mandelawi.
Name?
Salman Mandelawi.
Salomon?
Yeah.
How do you spell it?
S-O-L-O-M-O-N.
Solomon.
So what's like the current situation of the country right now? Are like still at war, or did the fighting stop?
Name?
Hi, my name is Linda. Linda.
Linda.
Okay. How are you trying to make Sierra Leone a better place and make a better impact on the people that are living there?
Hi, my name is Joshua Aidi. And Joshua. And in the book that we read, there was many reoccurring themes about the war. When you think about the war and how during and after the war, what comes to mind that stands out the most, that comes reoccurring, yeah.
Can you rephrase your question? What do you want to know?
Okay. When you think about the war, what thoughts come to mind when that are that reoccurred during the war and after the war that you think about yeah.
I mean, what are you asking, Joshua? You want to know what areas we can strengthen thinking about the war?
Yeah, like when you think about the war, what issues that
you think we can solve as a
what
government?
are the main issues that you think about of the war, and how would you be able to solve them?
My name is Barbara Mohammed.
Barbara?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. The first, what would you guys do if it happened again? And where were you when, during the first war?
Thank you very much. Let me respond to your questions. I'll start with Robert. You asked me about the executive outcome. Why did we decide to hire a mercenary group to help us during the war instead of the UN? I get you. I work with the United Nations, And then, well, I don't know how to put it, but there are a lot of issues that arise at the UN that is contingent on interest. You see a lot of issues happening in certain countries in the world. The United Nations never jumps into those issues. I don't want to be undiplomatic. But anyway, let's put it this way. I think we have a Chatham House rule here. What happens in the UN is there are certain countries that are priorities. Sierra Leone is a very tiny country. During our war, one of the countries that came to our aid was Nigeria initially. We didn't have a sophisticated military to fight the rebels. And the executive outcome that we had diamonds. They were interested in our diamonds. So they offered themselves to help. And the government at that time had nobody to look up to. It was only when the war escalated to certain level that the UN decided to come in. Sometimes the United Nations do come in somehow late on issues. But I may not want to delve into that. But there are priorities on their engagement. The Security Council, they have certain countries, if they hear one gunshot, they land there today because they are priorities. We were not initially prioritized. But thank God later on they came in. Okay? Yeah. Solomon, you asked about the current situation. Indeed, things are getting better. We're a country full of resilient people. From the accounts I gave, you see that we've gone through a lot of struggles, war, Ebola, and so on and so forth. But we still remain as a united country, and we're still trying to do the few we can to better the lives of our people. Because we believe we only have one country. That's Sierra Leone. So we have to make it better. Linda. Well, Linda's question and Solomon are Linda, like I said, we are determined as a government and as people not to have a reoccurrence of those 11 years of bitter wars. Could you imagine if they could chop up someone's arms? Could you imagine? Ishmael gave account of that, all right, in his book, yours, sorry. Could you imagine if your limbs are hacked? These were terrible moments. We still see the relics of the war. If you move on the streets of Freetown, you still see amputees. You see people without any arm. They are still in our society. Some of them come to seek asylum in the United States, some are in this country, but I don't think anybody wants to go through that crucible anymore. So we'll try to improve on policies that will be youth sensitive, on policies that will better the lives of youth, and we will never have child soldiers as a country anymore. Joshua said, how can we solve the problem? I believe one of the reasons why we had the war were due to bad government policies. And we believe if government puts in place youth-sensitive policies policies that takes care of everybody, that makes their lives better, I don't think we'll ever have another war. And we think government should strengthen that area. Barbara, what do you do for it not to happen again? Is it Barbara? Yeah, Barbara, I want to rest assure you that we will not have any more of war as a country. I know when you read the book itself from Ishmael, sometimes it creates some nightmare in your mind when he gives account of certain issues. And I know exactly how you feel. But our people are nicer than what occurred in the book. But nobody knew what got over society. And they degenerated to that level. So we hope that animalistic part of us will never show face on us anymore. I'll take 5 more questions if I have time. Oh, okay. I'm fine. One boy.
Everybody please be quiet. Please be quiet. Okay, go ahead.
So you know you said the policies were Jared's side. Jared's side. Yeah. You know you said before the war there was a lot of causes like unemployment and like bad education and all that. Why was the country in a terrible position? Why was there no education?
I'm Vivian, and yeah. If the government was in poverty, how did they get money for the child state to fix it?
Correct? Yes, you asked the question about why was the country in a terrible situation. I think from my PowerPoint, I spoke to you about corruption, nepotism. Government was generating money from the minerals we have. But these monies were not used properly. They were mismanaged. Corruption was on its height. And because of that, the citizens were not benefiting from monies got from these minerals. So that is why we are in a bad situation, because government was not managing its resources well. Vivian, you said how government got money to embark on the projects I spoke about, the child soldiers, the DDR, and so on. After the war, government was financially crippled. But with the United Nations and other donor partners, government was able to engage in these projects that restored the lives of these child soldiers and reintegrated them into society. We went around the world begging partners to assist. Moving, when I say moving with our cap in hand, begging. Otherwise, you would have heard of a nation of Sierra Leone after that war. But we thank God, we are back to life. We are moving as a country. And let me just tell you, during the war, we had 4 million population, which was lesser than now. But at least government is now in a better state to cater for the 6.1 million population that we have. At that time, even our representation at the UN, we only have 3 staff. we could not even pay salaries. And we thank God today there are over 9 diplomats at our permanent mission, and government is moving it. So, and I want to thank you all for your kind attention, for your attention. Thank you.
Counsellor Fawundu, thank you very, very much for coming here today. This is an extreme privilege for you to have a member of the permanent mission to the United States, to the United Nations, come and speak to you. I think that there are a lot of different lessons that you could be thinking about here. Not only the horrors of what occurred in Sierra Leone and their efforts to come back and become a nation that takes care of its people. I think this is something to think about countries around the world who are suffering from this, and think about our responsibility as citizens in our own country to make sure that we have a government that helps us be strong and to take care of its citizens. So there's lots of different lessons to learn here. I think that you're on your way, you're 9th grade, and there are a lot of things to move forward from here. Thank you, Mr. Aaron, for bringing
I just had from discussions with Mr. Erin Kranz that there are some of you who are interested in visiting Sierra Leone. As a permanent mission here, we can facilitate your travels, we can issue you visa to go to Sierra Leone and see for yourself. We have very nice beaches. It's a very nice country. The time when you are feeling cold here, it's hot in Freetown. The temperature now is about 85 degrees. So imagine, you can have your short pants on and so on. I'll give a few cards of mine for those who are interested. You can email me and we can follow up on your visit to Sierra Leone. Thank you.